It's not because I have this hatred of AI or anything like that, but because a lot of people just sort of like run in and I feel like they're almost diving into a pool when they can't see the bottom. And so you don't know if it's 40 feet deep or 2 feet deep. And unfortunately, I think some people are finding out the hard way. It's 2 feet deep. So I don't know how many millennials or Gen Xers we have on this, but if you remember the Oregon Trail, it was like my favorite game ever when I had a PC. I've had a PC since I was 3 years old, and that is the truth. Actually, it was a Macintosh, not a PC, when I was three. But my favorite game was Oregon Trail and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. But the one on Oregon Trail was so interesting because you would just randomly die. You would make it across, the plains and you would get to the river and you would randomly die, or you would die in the plains from like dysentery or something. I kind of feel like that's the best analogy for artificial intelligence. Like we're going somewhere, we know we want to get somewhere, but there is just so many opportunities for like sudden and imminent death, also known as liability in the business sector. So, one of the things I want to bring to your attention today is data poisoning. You're going to hear me talk about that off and on throughout this presentation. And what that means is when you have a really great collective data set and then you find out one of your sources was incorrect, it's the same thing with artificial intelligence. It's all based on your data set. So, when you hear data poisoning, it just means something bad has happened to your data. So, before we get started in really like the legal side of artificial intelligence, I want to talk about some basic AI concepts because I feel like even people who probably know a lot about artificial intelligence forget that everything boils down to two components. One is the data set, which is basically just all of your raw data in some form of digital, you know, storage, and then your algorithm. If you saw the movie The Social Network, and which was all about the founding of Facebook, which is now Meta, you will remember perhaps that one of the things that they did is they talk about writing the algorithm on the window at Harvard University. Well, an algorithm looks just like it did in that movie. It is a string of bizarro characters all put together that prompt the computer to do this or that. And that's all AI is. It is a combination of an algorithm, which is just instructions, and a data set. And those are the two components. And if you're, since you only got two components, if one is bad, the whole tool is bad, right? Especially when it comes to your data set. The main thing that I stress with AI is maybe the algorithm's amazing, but the data set is tainted. It's either been poisoned through lack of security on the data set, or it just includes everything. And I don't know about any engineers, but I don't want anyone making decisions on an AI, using an AI tool where the data set comes from all that is available through Google. I'd much rather it be about empirical evidence or reputable and credible sources, and maybe not people who believe in the Illuminati or that, you're saving money with the Disney Vacation Club. And I hate to break it to any Disney enthusiasts out there, but it's not a cost saving measure. Um, and so just to point it out there, so you really want to focus when you're talking about artificial intelligence on those two things. Well, what's in the data set? And then how reliable is the algorithm? Because that's all there is. Now, there are three generic types of artificial intelligence that you need to be aware of. Yes, if you are an AI expert, you know that you're like, Sarah, this is oversimplified. Yes, it's oversimplified, but just roll with me because we only have, 30 minutes to an hour and not 2 days. So the first one is your artificial narrow intelligence. This is like your basic chatbot, right? But not the chatbot like ChatGPT. This is like the chatbot in your Walmart app. So anyone who has ever had to, or not had to, because I think it's a great privilege nowadays, but ordered groceries from Walmart online and had them like delivered or did it on Walmart pickup. If you've ever had something missing, like maybe they forgot your lemons or your shampoo or whatever, you have a couple of choices at that point. You can call Walmart, which nobody in their right mind would ever want to do, right? Because that's torture. You can go into Walmart, which you wouldn't be picking up your groceries if that's what you wanted to do. You don't want to go in there. Or you can get online and there's this little chat bot that pops up and says, "How can I help you today?" And all that chatbot does is send you a series of very basic questions that eventually directs you either to the next phase of artificial intelligence, or an actual person. I'm not sure which it is, frankly. But that narrow intelligence is designed to do one thing. It's a predetermined data set. Like, are you calling about a new order or existing order? Existing order. All right. Is something wrong with your order? And it's like you click on that. That's narrow intelligence, one thing at a time. Another great example is your car. So I, like all very successful, highly paid, wealthy attorneys, drives an amazing Honda Pilot, right? Because that's what we all drive. And frankly, though, I will say, I put my pilot up against about anybody else's car because that thing is amazing. It is indestructible. I would know I have three boys playing five different sports all at the same time. And there is a little camera all over on all four sides of my vehicle that will tell me when I'm getting too close to something or my speed is approaching something too quickly based on the speed of the driver in front of me. And that is another example of artificial narrow intelligence. It does one thing. It's designed to send up a warning based on the data available to it. So, the next one is your artificial general intelligence. This is designed to do just about anything. It can write you a story, it can sing you a song, it can answer questions. But one thing you have to remember about artificial general intelligence, which this includes your Chat GPT and your Grammarly, which is, I know, a big one for people, is that it's kind of like your drunk uncle at a wedding or a funeral. You can ask it any question and it's going to give you an answer. It just may not always be reliable. Does that make sense? Right? And I always pick on my parents because I love them dearly, and I feel like the more you love someone, the more you're going to harass them, or at least in our family. But like my dad's like that. He is a Reformed Jew, and he hasn't been to synagogue, to my knowledge, in my 40 years of existence on the planet. But if someone who is not Jewish asks him a question about Judaism, which I live in the South, there's not as many Jewish people here, they ask him a question, he always knows the answer. And like I said, he's kind of like ChatGPT. He's always confident, but he's seldom correct, right? And then the last one is your artificial super intelligence. This is your machine consciousness. This is where machines compete to improve their own skills. So in other words, you try to see which machine puts out a better output. It's where the machine can communicate back with you and is constantly improving its answers. And unfortunately, this is an area that is actually technically not allowed in the United States, as we'll find out later, but they do it anyways. And this is just sort of to prevent the machines from overcoming the intellectual capabilities of a human, which I would argue they kind of already do. I would rely more on my computer's ability to get something correct than mine most of the time, but not ChatGPT. That would be the exception. So these are your three very generic types of artificial intelligence, right? You got the Walmart chatbot, the drunk uncle, and then something alien, foreign, and scary. Okay, so let's talk about the artificial intelligence process. And again, I'm sorry if I'm boring all of you smart engineers out there. Just hang with me. So it basically kind of goes in this very basic cycle that you see in front of you, and it gets put in, or at least it used to, although I don't feel like they do this anymore. But it gets put in front of what's called a Turing test. A Turing test is very similar to like a police roundup, right? Not that anyone on this call has ever been arrested, right? But if you were, let's say, in a car and you had alcohol and you were in college and, they're trying to figure out who brought the alcohol and they pull you over and they find out someone's got alcohol, they arrest everyone and then they figure out later, right? Who had it. They just arrest everyone, charge everyone, and then they bring you into individual rooms and they ask you questions and then they whittle it down. It's kind of like the Turing test for artificial intelligence. There's three rooms. One has an interrogator. One has a live human being, such as myself. Although the interrogator is also a human. And then the other one is the computer. And the interrogator will ask the machine and the person the same question and take their answers and try to determine which answer came from a human and which answer came from the computer. And if the interrogator cannot tell that one is a machine and what is not a machine, the machine is declared the winner and functional generative artificial intelligence. So it's a very basic test. And I will say, and I'm not, making fun of, I'm an elder millennial, my millennials or, Gen Alphas or Gen Zs. And frankly, I can't remember which one comes first. But usually we give ourselves away as people with our poor grammar and our BRBs and our LOLs and their, IDFs and, whatever it is. But all right, now let's talk about the benefits of AI, because again, this presentation is called Warning AI, but I'm not blind to the fact that there are incredible benefits to artificial intelligence that we're really only now, really starting to see. So the first one is medication management. So maybe this is because I'm a lawyer and, lawyers are snobby and arrogant and think we know everything. But for the longest time, I really didn't understand what pharmacists did, and this is sort of embarrassing. I always was kind of curious, like, why does it take 6 years of college to learn to count pills? Like, my 7-year-old can do that, right? And then, of course, I watched this show based in New Orleans called The Pharmacist, and I realized what they're doing is they're constantly monitoring medication side effects, looking at the known health of the person and trying to make sure that, if they give you Coumadin, before, and along with another tool or another drug that's usually given before a surgery, they catch that so you don't bleed out on the table during the surgery, right? So it's pretty complicated. So some of the new AI tools do really great things is they do a lot of that that analysis very quickly for the pharmacist, because everyone's always complaining when they have to wait in line at the pharmacy. And of course, the person who's 95 years old in front of you who wants to pay with a paper check has 750 questions, about their Medicare coverage, right? So pharmacists, unfortunately, are trying to get through all of this at the same time. And I think one of these benefits of AI, which is they can go ahead and run an analysis on all the patient's medication based on different information about them, their age, their gender, their race, because all of that matters in medicine, right? Men and women don't always have the same indicators of various health conditions like heart attacks, and obviously some races are more predisposed to certain diseases than others, right? And then kind of puts it all together and spits out potential alarms that the pharmacist can then go in and kind of break down and be like, okay, this is a false alarm. I'm not worried about this, and put that human eye to and give a realistic answer. So I think that's a great use of AI. Then you've got predictive blood flow patterns. I actually had a client who years ago was doing this in urology. I'm going to mess this up. Urological surgeries. Michelle, did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Not, this is, by the way, what adult dyslexia and ADHD looks like, ladies and gentlemen, live and in person. But it predicted blood flow patterns so that they can make sure that they knew what the likelihood of a patient having a bleed out or a complication was before the surgery, and be extra careful. Another thing like this was done at Senior Sinai Hospital. So this is another amazing use of AI. You probably heard about AI being used with radiology and trying to spot mass clusters of cells. That produces a lot of false positives, according to my radiology friends. But they do say it feels nice when they go through it and they can kind of weed out some of the false positives, and they feel like they got two set of eyes for the cost of one. So again, there's great medical benefits. And DHHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, does regulate some AI tools when it comes to medicine, but they're very specific and it's not well known. So all I could find on this as of about a year ago, and I haven't checked in about a year, was one document from 2021, and this is in 2024, that said we reserve the right to regulate artificial intelligence tools that are designed to look for signs of a stroke, certain types of fractures in a wrist, and something about vision impairment. So there were a few other things on that list, but they are starting to weigh into it. And I think we're going to see more of it, especially as AI tools move into medicine more and more, as, empirical data tools can only be helpful, I think, in a scientific space. All right. So that was my yay AI, my little rah rah moment for artificial intelligence, which I secretly try to keep out of my life. But there's significant dangers to commerce as well as national security in the interest of time, and uh, not to make anyone too anxious, although I'm happy to share, a danger to AI national security story after this if you want. But there's significant dangers to commerce. And one of the biggest dangers is that, in case you hadn't heard, social engineering is back in the cybersecurity space. So hackers, you have to remember, whenever you're in a criminal enterprise, and not that you would know that because you've ever been in a criminal enterprise, and not that I would know because I've never been a criminal, at least to my knowledge, right? But one thing hackers do is, because they're looking out for their own best interests, they're more motivated to beat the technology and beat the system, right? Because they have skin in the game. That's the reason for that term. And they are using AI to their advantage faster than we can correct it in the cybersecurity space, because the AI has the ability to replace the language barrier that is otherwise present for hackers around the world. A lot of hackers, yes, are in the United States. There's some in Canada and English speaking countries, but the majority of them, especially the ones that attack the United States, they aren't here. And I don't know if you've ever had, ransom note or listened to a ransomware voicemail, but years ago, before AI became free on the internet, right, and readily available, and easy to use, you'd have a very heavy Eastern European accent on the other end of the phone, right? Or, some other form of broken English where it was very obvious. Well, now that language barrier is taken away, especially in writing. Now, don't get me wrong, you still get all the emails from the Nigerian prince that randomly wants to leave you his fortune, right? Or the lady in, remote Ireland that has died and decided that you're in charge of choosing all the philanthropies for her, $4.5 million, right? You're still going to get plenty of those. And no, those are not real. But they are now also getting really good that they're kind of being able to spoof out some of the most elite software in the world designed to catch that spam. And again, it's because they're not giving themselves away as urgently as they did before. So I know this is hard to see on this email, and I did not make this email. I found this one on the internet, but I was like, this is just so good. I have to steal it. But there are 6 issues with this email. And the one that I find the most impressive, is look at on the fake side, the word Microsoft in the to line, it has an R and an N, a lowercase r and an N to make a lowercase m. I would have never seen that, and I consider myself a good eye. Another thing that it's not always getting correct is punctuation, a few issues of spelling. Right. But what used to be an email that would never look this good and never even think for a second fool you is going to be a lot more convincing. And that is where I think we are seeing AI really advance phishing campaigns and cause a danger to commerce. All right. So I talked to you about, why AI is good in the medical space and why AI can be dangerous in the commerce space. So what is going on with AI? A lot of people, especially, depending on how you read the news, AI is the next big thing. NVIDIA had major share explosion this week. Every Meta has had just a huge increase in its stock price over the last 6 months, all related, they say, to its artificial intelligence technology, right? And of course, Elon Musk, regardless of how you feel about him, he's launching another artificial intelligence tool. I think that launched on Monday, I almost want to say. But here's this crazy thing. This is supposed to be the most powerful tool of our generation or potentially of our century. This is probably the most influential thing. People are investing money like just crazy into this, and there's absolutely no regulation on it. Isn't that a little scary? Right? So we have all of these federal agencies that are designed to protect us from various things. And I gave you a few examples, right? The FCC is in charge of making sure that my 11-year-old doesn't fly his drone too close to the airport, right? And interfere with radio communications. The FDA is there to make sure medical devices that we use are safe. They are there to make sure, that we don't all get food poisoning. They're there to make sure that, the opioid crisis doesn't happen again, right? And the Federal Trade Commission, who I think will ultimately get stuck with the mission of regulating artificial intelligence, their job is to prevent unfair and deceptive trade practices, which covers a whole host of issues. And they actually do a great job with their enforcement and give money back to the public, which is the only agency that really does that, by the way. So if you represent the FTC, thank you as a consumer. But the point is that there's nothing. There's literally no federal laws regulating the use of AI. This is what we have from the federal government so far. And I say this as an existing federal employee, part-time, because I am a U.S. Army reservist, right? First one is they had the AI and Government Act in 2020, which basically said to everyone, and whether it's encouraging to you or not, we're going to figure it out. That was the message. That is all that law says, I swear, is that the federal government is going to figure out artificial intelligence. You're like, cool. I'm sure you're going to do a great job, right? When you're competing salary wise with, Facebook and Silicon Valley. I'm sure someone is dying to make GSA wages in one of the most expensive places in the country to live, right? And then the next one is identifying outputs of Generative Adversarial Networks Act. This is probably the only decent piece of federal legislation, because there's only three on artificial intelligence, which says you really can't make a computer that can compete with another computer and be better than us. So remember, we were talking about super AI. This is the law that kind of outlaws super AI, but it's never been enforced and there's no way to enforce it. And then the last one is the AI Training Act in 2022. This basically goes back to the AI and Governments Act of 2020, which said, we're going to figure it out. The government came back and goes, we're going to figure it out and we're going to hire people to figure out. And that is literally all we have from the federal government on the most influential tool of our time. Doesn't that make everyone feel amazing? Okay, so what does that mean? So this does not mean that you can run around and do whatever you want with your little AI tool that you bought from a startup and that you want to use in whatever function. That's not what that means. The states have started to weigh in. So whenever the federal government does not weigh in on an issue, they leave it to the state governments, especially if they consider it to be a state police power. So the 10th Amendment to the Constitution says states can enforce their own laws that are considered police powers, in other words, designed to protect their citizens. And AI apparently is going to fall into that, whether it's intentional or otherwise. Now, most states have taken and I think 33 of them have taken the federal government's approach to AI laws and passed some sort of law that says we're going to form a commission of political appointees, so we're great, and we're going to figure it out. And those have produced nada in most cases, with the exception of 9 states, right? So Illinois, I can tell you, prohibits the use of AI in videotaping job applicants without their knowledge. And Nevada used to have a law that prohibited self-driving artificial intelligence cars, but they've since repealed that. My guess is they're not really concerned about it because Nevada is huge and the entire population lives in like 3 cities, so they're not super concerned about it. But no offense to anyone down here from Nevada. Great state, Love Vegas. All right. So what are the trends that I'm seeing? I'm seeing that 8, it's actually 9. I should have updated that. States now have artificial intelligence laws. 8 of those states are new. All right. One of the big trends is they're finally cataloging artificial intelligence created images of children in compromising positions as criminal child pornography. So, in other words, people who were perhaps substituting abusing real kids and instead create AI images abusing kids, that is still criminal under a lot of the laws, which I think is a great thing, right? The next is some of the laws are saying if you are having your consumer, customer, client, what have you, interact with an AI tool, you need to tell them. So you need to let them know that this isn't an AI tool, especially physicians. In the state of California, they have to disclose if someone is interacting with an AI tool in lieu of like a healthcare provider and give them the option, excuse me, to connect with a human representing that healthcare provider's firm. So that is new and in California. Another one is using AI to copy likeness. And I've got some good examples for you today. One I saw today and I was like, oh, I have to embed this video. One, because I'm like such a Swiftie, and two, it was just cute. And then the last one is discriminatory use of artificial intelligence. Now, for anyone out there who's like my father-in-law and they hear the word discrimination, they immediately roll their eyes and get frustrated. And it's like, look, it's not just about like Title VII Civil Rights Act style of discrimination. It's not just about talking about, gender, race, religion, sexual preference, sexual orientation. It's nothing like that. It's not just, well, I mean, it is that, but it's more about the medical side of things, which is if you are producing an artificial intelligence tool that is designed to detect heart attacks, in one particular group or another, or just in general, designed to detect early signs of a heart attack, you want to make sure you have data from both men and women in that group and not just men, because women have different signs of a heart attack than men do, as sort of an early presentation. Or if you have an AI tool that's studying, signs of certain types of genetic diseases in children, right? You want all the data to be from pediatrics. You don't want it to be from geriatrics, right? So that's some of the discrimination issues that we're talking about. All right, so let's talk about some of these new state laws. So Colorado and Utah got in a little bit of a race and tried to decide who was going to pass the first state law on artificial intelligence in the country. And honestly, I can't remember who won. I want to say it was Utah with Colorado right behind them, but they were literally a day apart. I remember because I wrote this article on my blog. I was like, oh, we have our first state AI law. I was like, this is landmark and groundbreaking. And then the next day, the other one passed. And I was like, well, let me take that down and talk about both of the new ones. Right. So the first one in Colorado basically says that we have to prevent algorithm discrimination in high-risk AI systems. And what they've defined as high-risk AI systems means that any AI system used to make a decision about somebody's access to any type of opportunity, and it doesn't just have to be the state. So like scholarships, employment, financial, essential government, healthcare, housing. If you are using AI to kind of whittle down your applicant pool for one benefit or another, right, you have to make sure you're taking reasonable steps to prevent algorithm discrimination. So how do you do that? Really, the only way to do that, and the way this is modeled, is to remove any reference to gender, age, unless there is an age cap on it, right? But gender, I would remove names because AI tools pick things up that we don't intentionally want them to pick up, right? And this has a pretty hefty penalty associated with it. This has a statutory damage of $20,000 per violation. Per violation does not mean for a person. So just know that a violation can happen multiple times a day against the same person. So that's when I say per violation, that's big money. The next one, Utah, is somewhat similar, right? But this applies to people who who have basically licenses to perform a task of some kind in that state. So it could be even someone cutting your hair. If they're using artificial intelligence to communicate or provide some sort of service to their clientele, they have to disclose that if they are licensed to perform it. Now, anyone who is not a professional engineer and not licensed in their state, I guess you're gold if you're in the state of Utah. But if you are a PE and therefore carry a license, that would be something to be considered. All right. A couple other new state laws. I promise I won't drone on about this too long because I am trying to keep a good handle on our time because I know it's nighttime for some of you, right? All right. So New York has their Loading Act, right? Which basically means any type of state function has to have some sort of human review over an AI decision, right? And this is effective here this summer. Michigan, their AI laws are about political advertisements and creating AI generated material that is intentionally deceptive around an election. And then kind of like I talked about with the child porn issue, also North Carolina added AI images to revenge porn. And this is actually a pretty serious issue that I think other states are going to pick up rather quickly, is the revenge porn issue. I know it's kind of taboo, but there's several cases where people will take someone famous and put their images, their face on some sort of image and pass it around. North Carolina is trying to actively curb that. And much like Illinois and California and New York, I would say North Carolina is right up there with sort of leading the charge in some of these new technology laws. Tennessee has their Elvis Act, which I thought was just so cute, right? They're saying that any person's voice is a protectable attribute, and you cannot use that in AI to create sort of your own, other form of income or use that content to your benefit, and it allows someone to sue. So a lot of these laws are all enforced by the state attorney general. Well, like any state agency, an attorney general's office has a limited amount of funds, a limited amount of people, and of course, an overwhelming number of tasks that they can only tackle so many at a time. So a lot of these laws are going to be kind of what I call paper tigers for a while, where like it's really hard for someone to enforce them. But this law in Tennessee, the Elvis Act, they're allowing individuals to sue. So I think we will see a lot of activity on that. And then again, sexual deepfakes, child pornography, that's a big one. We talked briefly about Illinois already. Let's talk about some of the ones in California. They passed 18 new artificial intelligence laws in 1 year. Some of them are in effect, and some of them don't go into effect until January 1, 2026. I'm only going to talk about a few of these because it's just exhausting. And also, I don't think you want to listen to me rattle off 18 different laws. That would be pretty miserable. So I'll spare you. But let's talk about a few of them. One is you cannot take existing images of real people and alter them through digitization, especially showing intimate body parts. So it's kind of like that revenge porn thing we saw in North Carolina. Next one is if there's any kind of election, right, you've got to be careful. And the governor gets to decide which elections matter and which don't. But you can't use AI to create deceptive material content. I don't know how they're going to enforce these things. Again, these are all attorney general enforced with the exception of the candidate one. That one can't, the candidate can sue, but that's not really a good look for any type of candidate. And the one at the bottom, this is really interesting. So let's say if someone in California wanted to use an AI image of Marilyn Monroe and use that to promote something, you can't do it unless it's like a documentary, right? It's a scholarship, sports broadcast, it's fleeting or incidental, or there's an advertisement for a documentary, right? Or a sports broadcast. They have to get permission from the estate. And this is really protecting protecting the rights of estate owners for, the heirs of really famous people. We see this a lot. I really feel like I haven't read the legislative notes on this, but I feel like this is the Kobe Bryant law because Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's widow, he passed away a couple of years ago in a tragic helicopter accident, has been very, very strict about protecting his legacy. So it wouldn't surprise me if this sort of originated there. All right, I'm going to move on. There we go. All right. So right here, this is a new special over here. I think it's going to be on your left-hand side. I don't know if anyone has watched the Gabby Petito documentary. Sorry about that. The Gabby Petito documentary, but they actually used artificial intelligence to recreate her voice and reading emails and phone calls. And Netflix actually, I think, has its major corporate presence in Los Angeles. And I don't know if they did this, but that was illegal for them to do unless they had permission from the parents because she died within the last 70 years. And therefore, her parents get to control the use of her voice likeness. So that is just one way. And this one I thought was just too cute not to share. Let me press
We
play.
have a lot of projects,
Hold on.
but we don't spread ourselves thin. We really like being what I.
Just to let everyone know, Taylor and I got engaged last week. We wanted to keep it a secret from everyone because we wanted some privacy. I proposed to her in a location that I won't mention, but that location holds a special place in both our hearts. And she said yes and started crying her eyes out. And
So that is now illegal in Tennessee and in California. And incidentally, Tennessee is where Taylor Swift lives. So if they had done this, and there's plenty of AI videos of Taylor Swift, that would now be illegal in those two states. And people do this all the time, playing with the tools. I don't think they realize the legal impact of some of these sort of spoofs and decisions. Oop, now it doesn't want to let me go to the next slide. Pardon me, y'all. Here we go. All right. So we talked about the states that have AI laws specific to artificial intelligence. In other words, artificial intelligence appears, the phrase artificial intelligence appears somewhere in the law and is designed to tell you what you can or cannot do with artificial intelligence. But here's the thing. This is why I said the pool that you're diving into is 2 feet deep potentially, and why you could just die at any point in time from dysentery or something like that. And one of those is there's plenty of laws already out there in various states that don't deal with AI, but that the use of AI could accidentally kind of wander into and get you in trouble. So here's a great example from CVS Health Corporation in Massachusetts. And this is going to be a major class action. So what happened here is Brendan Baker was applying for a job at CVS. And as part of his interview, they videotaped him so that they could then upload the video to their software to analyze whether or not he was telling the truth about X, Y, or Z. And also they're looking for other signs. He was designing, I think he was trying to work in the pharmacy as a pharmacy tech. And so they want to see if he's got signs of addiction or anything else that would negate his, desire or ability to work directly with narcotics or other types of drugs. Well, unfortunately for CVS, they are now in a full-blown lawsuit because the state of Massachusetts prohibits employers from using lie detector tests as a condition of employment. Now, you're saying, Sarah, they used artificial intelligence, not a lie detector test. Well, here's the thing. The lie detector test law is that defines a lie detector test, says a polygraph or any other device, mechanism, instrument, or written examination, the results of which are used or interpreted for the purpose of determining deception. So the artificial intelligence, video interview technology qualified as a lie detector test. So even though Massachusetts doesn't have any laws on artificial intelligence, this law ended up getting hung up, and now CVS is in a full-blown lawsuit because their motion to dismiss was denied. So just something to think about. Let's talk about another example while I take a quick Stanley break. Unintended consequences here was with McDonald's. So if you've driven through McDonald's, you know that you're probably going to pull up. The speaker is going to be kind of crappy. They put your order on that little screen now at some of the nicer McDonald's, and basically it pops up all wrong. And then you go through the drive-thru. You have to correct it with the human being, and then you pay, and then you may or may not get your meal as you desired, right? Well, McDonald's decided they were going to cut out the middleman in the state of Illinois, and they were going to install voice recognition, also known as AI software, that was going to capture someone's voice, learn different dialects, right? Because there's different accents all over the country. Learn someone's voice and be able to interpret what they ordered accurately without having to hire someone to take that order over the squawk box, right? And they're like, what a brilliant idea. We're saving all this money on, personnel, and people are going to possibly get their McChicken with their extra pickles the first time around, right? Well, unfortunately, this law violated the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act. Biometric information is anything that is unique to your biology. So your retina scan, your thumbprint, your DNA, and your voice all have biometric components. And so they got sued, and they were basically told that, like, you're not allowed to capture my biometric information without explicit written consent. The Illinois law also requires, that certain things be included in that consent document, including that how long they're going to keep it, what they're going to use it for, and then how they're going to destroy it. Well, none of that was there. This is a drive-through. We don't typically sign long consent forms every time we go through a drive-through. So what happened? Case is going to trial, and I think McDonald's ended up settling this case, which was the right idea. The problem is they wasted all this money on this voice software, had it installed, and now they're defending a lawsuit. And Illinois has statutory penalties per violation, again, not per person. So if 1,000 people went through that drive-through a day and 1,000 people, gave their order into the machine, that's 1,000 violations at $2,500 a violation per day. So it adds up really quick, something to be considerate of. So we talked about a lot of the do's and don'ts of artificial intelligence, and this is my last slide before we get to the one that's about me. And really, I wanted to give you a few takeaways for using AI, because I realize with engineers, it could be anything, right? You guys could be using it for absolutely anything. And I wanted to kind of give you some basic things before you use it. The first thing is, if you're going to use AI and it's going to interact with anybody, whether that's an employee or you, the business owner, whoever it is, I don't care if it's interacting with anyone, make sure you get consent from that person. If you have to do it online, there are ways to do that. You give them the option online. Hey, you're going to be interacting with an AI tool. Please opt out, and make them force that before they can move on. The next thing is you want to have your attorney check your pending legislation. So unfortunately, state legislatures do not meet all at the same time of year. And one legislative session is not always the only one, right? Like in Louisiana, we have one regular, and then we have an extraordinary and another extraordinary and another extraordinary session. And it can go all the way into the fall, even though it starts in March, right? Well, every state's on their own schedule. So legislation can be passed at any point in time. And there's no guarantee as to when it's going to be effective. And so you don't want to get caught sort of in there. So you always want to have someone check. And the next thing is if you are going to be using artificial intelligence, you want to make sure the data set, one, has certain cybersecurity protocols in it so it cannot be poisoned, but two, that all of the data in there is anonymized as much as possible. Now, anonymization has different meanings depending on the industry that you're in. So if you are in the medical field, anonymization has 18 different identifiers, which once you anonymize it, it's pretty much useless because it doesn't tell you anything because it's 18 different elements you have to remove. But you want to anonymize it as much as humanly possible so that you can avoid any of those algorithm discrimination claims, especially outside of the medical community where the discrimination claims pertain to those Title VII protections, protected classes like race, religion, and gender. So that is sort of a brief overview on the legal landscape for artificial intelligence. This is me, and I am more than happy to take y'all's questions. Do you use AI, and if so, for which applications? So that looks like that is for Sabia Abdi.
Dr. Abdi, yeah, Sabia, hi. So yeah.
And then, there's another one from Mr. Koenig, but we'll start with Sabia and then we'll go up. So obviously we all use AI, whether we realize we're using it or not. You cannot buy a Microsoft device without artificial intelligence, but you can turn off its features. So the only way that I use AI is in my cybersecurity software in terms of trying to recognize elements of spam, and looking for those. So we are using it that way. I obviously use it in my vehicle because I have that amazing Honda Pilot that I recommend to everybody that tells me when I get too close to a car. But generally, I try to stay as away from artificial intelligence. I have developers that'll call me sometimes and be like, would you recommend our product to anybody? We use artificial intelligence to determine, wetlands mitigation and this and that. And I'm like, I'm staying out of it. I think we're just too early. I can't see the bottom of the pool, so to speak. I don't know where I'm diving in. So I would be very cautious. I do have recommendations if you're thinking about purchasing an AI model or you're in development. And those recommendations I took out of this presentation since we were doing a little bit shorter of a deal, but I remember those off the top of my head. The first one that I would recommend in terms of artificial intelligence, if you were thinking about buying a tool, is you want to ask if you can try to use it for free and really test it out. The next thing you want to ask is where's their data set from? And if they don't know, that's a huge red flag. If they cannot explain to you where their data set is from and how they maintain the data set, walk, because usually it's, means it's Google. And then the other thing I would tell you is I would stay away from any of the online data sets. I know ChatGPT says that they erase all your data with the privacy setting, that you input into it, but anything you put into an AI model is going to be used to inform that model and potentially come out later. So nothing confidential. And like I said, if you believe that they're protecting your privacy, I have a unicorn in the back of my Honda Pilot that I'd love to sell you. All right, let's go to the next question. Let me go up to Mr. Koenig. So I'm going to read his comment. Several inherent characteristics of AI systems expose them to legal challenges, most notably copyright. Yes. Privacy, plagiarism, libel, slander. Yes, yes, yes. It sounds like you read the same, Mr. Koenig, that I read, which is the legal risk taxonomy for generative artificial intelligence. This is great. So what about, although there is awareness of some of these issues, most potential solutions are in the future. What about legal challenges in the interregnum? I have to be honest, I don't know what that means.
Interim?
Yeah, interim. Okay, good. What about the legal? You're going to see them. They're popping up very slowly. A lot of them are being popped up in terms of software copyright, but you're going to, like I said, you're going to see them slowly. Now, here's the problem. Judges are not being forced to keep up with this stuff the way regular law is. So it's going to be kind of like cybersecurity litigation was from about 2016 to 2022. It's going to be very unpredictable, and you're going to have some judges say, this is not a cause of action. Get out of my courtroom. You're dismissed. And then you're going to have other judges say, there's more to this, and the litigation is going to drag out longer than anticipated, which is why it's so important to do your homework. And like I said, the best way to kind of avoid these things, right? Get consent, anonymize, and constantly check your legislation. All right. Next one, Roger. How is data poisoning determined? Who or what criteria is used to determine not poisoned? That is an amazing question, right? Because there's no, unfortunately, and this of course comes, Roger, I don't know what kind of engineer you are, but this is a very engineer question. There's no litmus test for this, which stinks, right? You can't just determine whether data is poisoned. You have to go on the likelihood of it. And data poisoning is very slow. It happens over time, right? So let me give you an example. An example is that the United States, in its satellite features to determine activity that is indicative of an adversarial country taking an adverse action against the United States, uses satellite footage to determine that like this type of action is indicative of this. And so if they see repeated photos photos, they will go ahead and, create a warning. Well, what if those photos were slowly replaced with photos of school buses? Right? Then we're going to start to see school buses and think there's adversarial activity that could potentially influence a major decision that could be very harmful to other people. So data poisoning is something that happens very slowly, which is why what I tell you is you want to test that product for free as often as possible, because you want to compare your answer to the answer that the AI is giving you and make sure you guys are very parallel to each other. It's not going to be exact, because any deviation that is caused by data poisoning is going to happen very slowly. So another way other than testing it is to be very specific when you speak to whoever is selling you this software is what did they use to compose their data set? How often are they updating it? And what cybersecurity tools are in place to make sure it doesn't poison? You would love to have a data set that is kept on a closed circuit network. In other words, it's completely air gapped. No one can get to it except the component of the digital system that is using the algorithm to prompt the response from the data set. That is the only one you want to know, because otherwise, like I said, it's very slow and you won't know it until it's too late. So again, test it, ask them how they're securing it, right? Their data set. And if they can't answer that question, that's a problem, right? And how are they updating it? Because, what we know about cancer from 10 years ago is totally different than what we know about cancer today, right? So it's a huge change. So you want to know, again, that they're updating it. So that's what I'm concerned about with data poisoning. But data poisoning, I really feel like comes back to cybersecurity. Are they taking those measures to do it properly? Next one, this last name is it's Yukon. I really hope I get that correct. So where can I understand? I assume I understand the limitations of AI related to areas in medications or other areas now or in the future. Okay, so kind of like I said before, we don't really have any federal regulation on this, and the state regulations that I'm seeing have absolutely nothing to do with healthcare, with the exception of that one law in California that says, if you're talking to a healthcare provider online or a healthcare provider's entity, they have to give you the option to talk to a human until you're talking to AI. So the limitation of AI relating to medications right now is really none. Which is terrifying, right? Now, like I said, DHHS put out some random document. And it was like an 8-point font. It was almost like they were trying to bury it in obscurity, saying we reserve the right to look back and regulate these types of topics. So I think the best bet is going to be staying on CMS, DHHS, and making sure they're not putting out any literature on medications until the FDA decides that when it comes to medications and artificial intelligence constructs, they're going to weigh in, because right now there's nothing. So you just really got to be careful. And again, I hate to say call your lawyer, but call your lawyer. Because they're the only ones who are going to really know what they're looking for in terms of monitoring that legislation or other types of information that could be kind of brought into that. If you are asking this from a healthcare perspective side, they just released a bunch of new security rules as to HIPAA when it comes to dealing with any type of patient care and protected health information. If you're asking about it from the healthcare provider side, I do think some of those security rules kind of weigh a little bit into AI, but generally the safest thing is just let's sit back for a while and see how deep the pool is. Next question. If I use a document for an AI model training, do I need permissions from the owner of the document? Does the answer change if the document is a public or private document? So if they have posted the document online, and we know this from the GitHub software copyright series, and they have not protected it, you do not have to get their permission. They've unleashed it into the public, especially if they have not copyrighted the document and said that you can't, replicate this. It's subject to my intellectual property ownership. If the document is private and you're using the document for AI model training, I do not think you need to get permissions from the owner of the document at this stage. And the only reason I say that is if you're using that to build your own model, and even if it's not publicly available, depending on what you do with that model, I don't think you need to get permission to build the model. What you do with the model after that may be subject to a different question, depending on, what the document is. Is it, registered as a copyrighted product? Does it contain trademarked information, confidential information, privileged information? That's where that would come in. But if you're just using that to build an AI model, depending on what you're going to do with that model, I think just to build it, no. And unfortunately, a lot of these questions are going to be unanswered because there's no laws on it. So really, like I said, the laws we do have are, don't use AI to create child porn. Don't mimic a celebrity in the states of California or Tennessee with artificial intelligence. Don't interfere with elections. Don't, use it to create revenge porn. Those tend to be really the laws that we have in place at this time. And don't use it to interview applicants for jobs in Massachusetts or Illinois. Next comment is from Aditya. Oh, she said something nice. Thank you so much. That was really nice of you. Let's see. We've got Miss A. I agree with you. People are talking all about AI, but using AI with security will define the world. Yep, absolutely. Another thank you. Could I please talk? And this is from Miss Yilmaz. Could you please talk about the AI responsibility, liability domains for developers, trainers, implementers, institutions with respect to the law? Okay, so the state of Tennessee said that any public university in the state of Tennessee that is using AI in any form or facet has to disclose that to whoever's going to be interacting with that tool. And then obviously, like I said, in California, you have to disclose if someone's interacting with it. But in terms of responsibility, liability, none. Now, whenever there's an absence of like legal liability saying you cannot do this with your AI tool or you have to do this with your AI tool, and obviously we saw that in some of the states like Colorado, Utah, there was some specific laws in there. And by the way, I will email my presentation to Michelle if you guys want it. I am happy to, hand it out as much as possible. But the other thing I will say is there's always this common concept of negligence. So the way law was created was to create different frameworks that would stand the test of time. So kind of like the Constitution. You want to create one generic framework that you can kind of, synthesize as much as you need to, but generally can withstand the flexibility of time. And negligence is that one concept. So if someone is presenting themselves as an expert in the artificial intelligence field, and I've built this amazing tool and it's going to solve all your problems, and they're making representations to you that you would then be induced to rely upon to use their tool, and it turns out it's completely fabricated. They didn't protect their data set. They did not hire good programmers. Their algorithm is messed up and it doesn't do any of the things that you bought it for. You can still sue them for negligence because that is that generic framework for when you've done something bad. Or you really want to have, if you're going to buy something in the contract, that it has to meet certain performance metrics, and then you can sue them for breach of contract. But like I tell a lot of my clients, if we have to go to court, we haven't lost, but we're not in good standing because you don't want to have to go to court because the only people who win if you have to sue someone are the lawyers like me that get paid by the hour, right? And so I try to tell my clients we want to avoid that and we want to get a resolution beforehand. So the best thing you can do is send very scary letters, threaten to sue them, and really make sure you paper down your contract. So if you do have to sue, you get those attorney's fees back. Let's see. That was another nice comment. Okay. Very interesting presentation. And this is Renita Fink. I had no idea there were so many laws. I know, me either. Like I told you, California passed 18 in the last couple of months. I just went through a drive-through in Houston with the automated system. Should we consider it illegal? Texas actually does have biometric information privacy laws. They do. And they're one of 6 or 7 states that have them. And so depending on how the tool was used, so if it's using your vocal expression to improve the model and develop it, then yes, it could be. And again, most people don't know this. In fact, there's a really famous case called the BNSF Railroads case out of Illinois, where they basically, to work the railroads, you had all the contractors and drivers would have to scan in with their thumbprint, and no one bothered to check to make sure it was legal to do that in Illinois, and it wasn't without all the consent forms. And BNSF Railroads got popped for $228 million. Because it was per violation. So not per person that logged in, but every time someone came in and out of the gate. So if I came into that gate, once in the morning and then once to leave and to get lunch or whatever, that's 4 violations in a day. So just something to think about. That it could be, which is why you want to check with your lawyer. What are the implications if you start using AI and there is legislation implemented after which impacts your case? Oh my God, that is such a great question. So Garish, that is an amazing question. So different laws get different types of retroactivity. So if it is a procedural law, it can retroactively apply, or a substantive law. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The law will say this goes into effect on this date. So California made some of their laws immediately effective, and then some of their laws aren't effective till January 1, 2026. So you'll have a little bit of lead time, but usually unless they say it's immediately effective or goes into effect on a certain day, you should assume that it could be applying right now. So you really want to, again, call your lawyer, check your legislation, because it's popping up. And by the way, California is the 5th largest economy in the entire world. The world, right? And it's a single state. So what California does, the rest of the nation is going to do. So they were the first to pass Consumer Privacy Rights Acts, right? And now we have all those, privacy policies that tell us that we can delete our information, see our information, whatever, and tell them not to sell it. 20 other states in the last several years have popped up. So anything California does, everyone else does. So I would imagine you're going to see more of the California laws that I mentioned pop up. Can government use AI to draft responses to inquiries? Is it ethical for them to do? Oh my gosh. Fin Wang. So that's a can of worms. And that is a very political issue right now. So responses to inquiries, they should not. They should be using a human eye, but is it illegal for them to do so? No, but depending on the state in which you're reading it, it could be yes. Because the way federal law works is federal law will supersede a state law in what's called the supremacy clause, right? But if there's no federal law on the topic and the state can lawfully pass that law, which they can, the state law will apply in the absence of a conflicting federal law. So it's really going to depend on what state you're in. Right. So if you're in any state like Colorado or Utah, that would be unethical. Or illegal? Do I think it's unethical? Yes, I do. I feel like there's a reason we have human eyes to things. I think if you want to use AI as a gatekeeper, right, to filter out like hateful comments, because sometimes, people love to just kind of like we first did with Siri, right? We would say weird things to Siri and see what she said back. Oh, I'm not the only one who did that, right? Michelle, you did that. You said weird things to Siri to see what she would write back.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
We still do it to ChatGPT.
Okay. So I think it's ethical to use it, Mr. Wang, if you are weeding out responses, but in terms of making definitive decisions that impact people's rights or access to certain government services, I do think it's unethical and I wouldn't do it myself. Okay. Next question from Dennis. Considering the rate of change in the laws, you mean to do these presentations monthly or keep it seriously? How can we track changes? So I don't do them monthly. I wish I could, but I have to practice law to feed my children, and they're all in private school. And my husband works for the Fed, so I'm the main breadwinner. But Dennis, I will tell you, if you have questions or you would like to hire me as your counsel, you have my contact information on the slide and Michelle has it, but I will happily come back and do this again if you guys want me back. So thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment, Dennis. So thank you. Mr. Wang again, can I use AI to write complaints to politicians? There's a lot to prevent me from doing so. Heck no, you can do whatever you want in terms of politicians. You cannot, though, create deceptive material about them on the internet. That's illegal in a few states. So that could materially impact the election. Are there any other questions? And if I didn't get them, I'm sorry. I'm looking. Oh, wait, here we go. There was one from Steve Johnson. I apologize, Mr. Johnson. All items that existed previously AI now considered AI: predictive models, heuristics, machine learning, probabilistic methods, learning systems, even search, state search, etc. Is biometrics considered AI? Biometrics is not considered AI, but it can be used to create an AI model or used to inform an AI model. Again, biometrics is literally like a piece of human genome, or I don't know if that's the right term, genomes, but a piece of human genetics, something that's specific to me. However, everything else, yes. So that was AI before we called it AI. Now, obviously, if the model is not being reliant on a digital data set, you could make an argument that it's not technically machine learning. By the way, machine learning is AI. It's pretty much synonymous at this point. I realize it used to be different and it's not but it's not anymore. But a lot of these are considered AI. I would say, depending on how your model is structured, if it's, combination of a data set and an algorithm, it's artificial intelligence, especially if you have to feed that algorithm or the algorithm is consistently improving based upon the questions being posed to it and the rating of the answers. So, and again, this is all, it's interesting. People, cybersecurity is only like 13 years old or 15, maybe 15 years old. AI is like 4 years old. And in the world of law, that is like still in utero, right? So I think there's a lot to come. I know I have my work cut out for me monitoring all these different AI laws. And like I said, get your attorney involved before you roll out any major products, because that is going to be really what could get you in some trouble, especially if you're going to be using it to interact with a person. And if not, you guys have my email. I'll drop it into the chat one more time, and I'm happy to correspond, with you guys separately if needed. And of course, I'm always happy to work with anyone that wants to give me a holler.